So with that technique of conscious chord changing, moving all of our fingers at the exact same time, really taking the time to um, kind of force our hand to do what we want without having to build up years of muscle memory, we can accelerate our learning quite quickly. So this is just like an extra kind of thing. I know we didn't do a ton of playing in this course. This was a lot of theory and a lot of how to apply these certain things to our playing. But I have quite a lot of other courses based in practical knowledge. A lot of it is available for free as well. However, I do have some quite large, quite extensive music theory courses that are coming out as well. It's taken me quite a long time to prepare them. This course wasn't necessarily meant to teach you a specific thing on the guitar or what have you, but it was more of like a general thing. Use these specific exercises to improve your playing, your self-awareness, and your focus, and general well-being, changing the way that we talk to ourselves and things, and developing things like a journaling practice that can help in learning any skill. So once again, I want you to take a look at where we can apply some of these things to other aspects in our life, to other things that we're trying to learn. Now that we are kind of wrapping things up, I want to encourage you once again to take a look at meditative practices separate from learning an instrument or learning a skill. Learning meditation and mindfulness as a skill is worthwhile all on its own. And I think that that is very important. And we can go directly to the sources, read books by Tibetan lamas and Buddhist teachers from Asian countries, and Hindu teachers from South Asia as well, like from India, as well as learning from some Western teachers as well. But I would encourage people to begin with some of the original teachings and to learn from people who grew up in that culture. I would like to encourage you to attempt to develop a mindfulness practice as well as applying these skills to your daily music practice. I would also encourage you to continue to develop a music practice that is rooted in having a certain amount of time dedicated to it and in holding mindful awareness and developing our focus. So much can be done just doing those things. And so if we really apply that, there's no really telling how far we can progress in how short amount of time. Obviously, things do take time, but I've found that in applying these techniques to myself as well, I can learn complex classical guitar pieces in a matter of days. And sometimes I'm only spending 20 minutes a day on them. But with that focused energy and the mindful energy and the positive self-talk and journaling practice, I can memorize and perfect a piece of music in not very long. I've also been playing guitar for 21 years now. However, before I started applying these things, it would still take me quite a long time to learn a piece, even after 10 or 12 years of experience in playing guitar. I've also found that when I've been joining bands, like there were times that I was joining a new rock band and they had like 15 songs that they already played that were original songs. So I didn't know them already. And in utilizing these practices, I was able to learn all the parts in maybe 1 week, ready to go to band practice. And things were still a little bit rusty, but I had prepared at least for every single song. And the same is true with my own band sometimes, like writing bass lines. I'm not really a bass player. I've just started doing it, but like incorporating these things into practicing the bass and then writing bass lines and applying that to music that is being recorded that I have to do that I've never done before has really been beneficial for myself in being able to play competently on an instrument that I am not that competent on. That being said, the bass guitar is fairly similar to a guitar, but the approach is rather different. And it is quite a different instrument. I would encourage you to continue to use my structure for structuring practice. And if we are learning a new concept, new chords, new scales, a new technique, a new electric guitar technique, like two-handed tapping or certain solo technique, to isolate it and then integrate it, right? So if you learn a new concept, even using a certain chord and a certain chord progression in songwriting or what have you, I would encourage you to integrate that immediately, put it into practice, not just practice, but put it into use. So try that out. Try to do it as soon as possible when you learn the new concept to apply it to your playing. I talk about this quite a lot in my improv course. The improv course at the time of me recording this is not out yet. It is all recorded. I look a little bit different in there. I have different hairstyle and things. It was recorded a couple years ago, but I'm still working on editing those videos at the time of recording this. It very well could be finished and out by the time that this comes out. But if not, just hold tight because it will be coming out. I also have a songwriting course that I talk about this as well. And anytime we learn a new concept that we want to integrate to songwriting, we should not hesitate to begin using it right away. Make sure we understand it, but then start using it immediately in our songwriting. The last thing I want to talk about before congratulating you on finishing this course is the difference between skill learning and memorization, and learning like concepts or memorizing a lot of material or memorizing names or what have you. When it comes to physical skills, there's a lot of muscle memory involved. And so the muscle memory has to be repeated on a somewhat regular basis, hopefully daily basis, to be optimal. All the things that we've been talking about, using our focus to continue to come back. We stray with our focus, we bring it back, all those types of things. Mindful awareness, understanding when we're no longer focused, and repeating certain things in small chunks, right? Now this can be true for memory as well. Let's say you're learning lines for a play. You usually don't read the entire paragraph over and over again if you're doing a monologue. You start with the first line, you repeat it several times, you hopefully repeat it in the way that you want to deliver it, not just monotonously, you do it out loud. And then you can slowly build upon that, and you might memorize the next line, you chunk it, and you go back and whatever. So this is sort of like skill learning as well, being able to memorize a huge amount of lines. However, when it comes to memorizing a lot of seemingly random things, or mathematical things, or things to do with science, I would say that there is a different approach. The way that we've been doing it in terms of how it would apply to memory would be rote memorization, which is repeating something over and over again, hopefully consciously, and having that be built into memory. But what we're doing here is we're largely building muscle memory, right? We're training our autopilot and we're cultivating awareness. But when it comes to memorization, there are other techniques that are better for that, like mnemonic devices, or even so far as to say memory palaces. And you can find a lot of ideas like this in other videos. This is not my specialty. However, we use a lot of mnemonic devices when we're learning to read music, for instance. Like you may have heard "Every good boy deserves fudge" for the lines on the treble clef, or "face" for the spaces in the treble clef. I don't like the gendered one. I prefer "every guitar beginner does fine" for the lines. And this helps people remember. So when we think about the lines on the staff from the treble clef, and we have to count to the third one, we think "every guitar beginner, B." Right? So it's a random kind of note, a random letter, but we remember by using a phrase. A memory palace is similar, where we use our imagination. We form a place, like it could be your living room. You have your couch, your bookcase, your TV stand, your coffee table, what have you. And you imagine those as being like 5 different locations in your room that you can clearly visualize. And then if you need to remember something, like taking out the trash, and it's the first thing you want to do when you wake up, you can imagine you're putting a whole bunch of trash on your couch, which is your first position, let's say. And then next thing you do is like maybe a bit of exercise. So you pile a whole bunch of weights, or like weightlifting, like those old-timey weightlifting dudes on your bookcase or something. And then the next thing you want to like is you got to make a smoothie. So you imagine on your TV stand there's 10 blenders all blending up smoothies, like ridiculous things like that. That would never really happen, right? But the more ridiculous the mnemonic devices or the things in your memory palace are, the more likely you are to remember it. So our memory works with association more than just repetition. So we want to link into that. When we're memorizing things like music theory, when we're memorizing music theory concepts, it can be very helpful to come up with mnemonic devices. One mnemonic device that I have come up with to help students memorize the strings on the guitar. So the strings on the guitar, from lowest to highest, meaning lowest in pitch to highest in pitch, are E, A, D, G, B, E. And so the mnemonic device should be something that's a little bit ridiculous and a phrase that you can remember. So the one that I came up with is something that the young students really think is funny, is every alligator deserves golden boiled eggs. And I taught that to a lot of my students, and so I said it probably several times within the lesson. But then sometimes I'll ask them weeks later if they can remember the order of the strings. And they'll start counting in their head, and they'll tell me all of them. And then I'll ask, how did you remember that? And they're sometimes a little bit embarrassed to say, because it's a silly phrase. But then they'll say, well, every alligator deserves golden boiled eggs. I'm like, wow, it worked. There was one that I came up with to help students learn the strings of the ukulele recently as well. There's 4 strings on the ukulele, and from highest to lowest, so the first string, second string, third string, fourth string, starting with the A string, A, E, C, G. So I came up with another one. Alligators eat candy grass. 4 strings, very simple. Alligators don't eat candy grass, right? But people tend to remember something that is kind of silly and ridiculous. And so that's a way that we can use mnemonic devices or memory palaces to remember things more reliably, but we have to come back to them, right? We have to remember what we put in first position in our memory palace, and so on. There's also this idea of peg, so like associating certain numbers or certain letters or whatever with certain phrases or certain things that you can visualize. Okay, but I'm not going to really go too much into that. There's lots of information out there on the internet that you can take a look at for helping your memory. And so with that, we've completed this course. I hope that you found it extremely informative, that we have a better understanding of what mindfulness is, what meditative practice is, and how we can actually apply a lot of those things when we're learning skills. I know that we have reviewed quite a lot, but we have body awareness practices where we are becoming more aware and cultivating awareness when we are practicing. And we can do this at any time in our day. Check in with your body, check in with your breath, what have you. Relax your shoulders or whatever it is. There is journaling, so making note of things and tracking progress, being as detailed as you want to be, but keeping track of the time that you're using to practice. Keeping in mind persistence is key. We want to persist in these things and we will improve. Then we have self-talk. We understand the negativity bias. We understand our proclivity towards being quite hard on ourselves. We want to hold ourselves responsible for things, but we don't necessarily want to be hard on ourselves. That doesn't really help anything. The more that we are hard on ourselves, we are belittling ourselves into believing things that aren't necessarily true, like that we can't learn how to play the guitar, which I found that quite a lot of people can learn how to play the guitar. Even 90-year-old people can learn how to play the guitar. And so we want to become more conscious and feel where the self-talk is coming from. and then replace that with something that's more helpful. I don't want to say more positive just as a general thing, but more helpful or hopeful. Then there is identifying issues and then learning how to solve the issues, becoming curious about our practicing, becoming aware of the issues, forming ideas and experiments for what to do to solve the problem, and then implementing those ideas and journaling if it works or not. And then we have building the focus itself. We have the isolation, integration, chunking method, and we have our mind as a dog on a walk, right? It wants to stray off and we lightly tug it back. It wants to go too fast, we consciously slow it down. We can use tools like a metronome and things to help us slow down as well. And if we incorporate all these things into our practice, we're going to be doing like so well, honestly. Even if you're doing one or two of these different pillars of this course, you're going to be practicing in a way that most people do not practice, but in a way that is facilitating you to improve much more quickly than your average person. And we are tapping into some of those things that some of the great players were doing kind of unconsciously, but we are doing them consciously. And I really do believe that if a lot of those people were applying these techniques as well, that they would probably have excelled even more so than they already did. So if you enjoy the content that I've provided here, once again, this course is free. I don't want to claim ownership for these ideas or really credit. However, if you do find that these are useful to you, just try to share it with other people. Lead other people to this course and encourage them to learn the other things that I provide as well. On my website, I should have a lot of resources, a lot of worksheets and things, and many different things to do with scales and arpeggios, and there's tons of content on there that you can pick up for yourself. Please consider taking one of my larger courses, like my course in improv and my songwriting course. If you found that there was a lot of content that you got a lot out of in this course, there is quite a bit more and a lot of very specific things to build upon what we're talking about here into more practical kind of playing and like what to practice and when and how to integrate and all those things. There's a lot of like direct like holding your hand through the process of these things. If you are interested in learning from me, I am a private music teacher. I am located in Vancouver, British Columbia in Canada. So if you don't live in Canada, you don't live in BC or Vancouver, it doesn't mean that you can't take lessons from me if you so desire. I also offer some online lessons as well. Although we haven't totally figured out how to have zero latency video calls, which I hope at some point we will figure that out so that we can actually practice rhythmic things online, that's still an option. So if you want to reach out, you can find my contact at my website, waxwingmusicstudio.com, or you can email me at wax.wing.musicstudio@gmail.com. You can find me on Instagram at a similar name. You can follow my band, parentheses, and whatever else. But for the most part, I just hope that you get a lot out of this. And if you do, just try to share it with other people. So congratulations. You've learned a lot of new things, I hope. And I also hope that you are going to apply all of this. But don't take my word for it. Try these things on your own. If you like, you can check out my other courses when they come out, like my course in mastering improvisation and also songwriting. I go into a lot more detail about what we ought to be practicing in order to improve upon those things. And I see this course as like a prerequisite to those. Because if we can apply this stuff to any of the things that we're learning future from me or other teachers or whatever, if we take this approach and we can think critically about these things and think critically even about our own self-talk and things, then we're going to be much better learners. Thank you so much. You've made huge strides, and my voice is about to give out. I've been recording for probably like 5 hours today. So I hope you have a great life, and I'll see you in the next course.